Have you ever wondered why foolish ideas spread faster than the truth? Why a harmless joke can dominate social media while profound thoughts are forgotten? Perhaps the problem does not lie in the ideas, but in ourselves. The trap of the crowd. Imagine one afternoon, you scroll through social media, your finger unconsciously swiping through countless images, videos, words, and then you stumble upon a bizarre scene. Thousands of teenagers recording themselves, biting into detergent pods full of chemicals. That absurdity once became a global trend in 2018. Not only was it dangerous, it was also vivid proof of one phenomenon. The crowd can turn stupidity into a temporary norm. But this contagion of the mind is not new. We have witnessed it many times in history, from witch trials in medieval Europe to the worship of extremist leaders in the 20th century, to ridiculous conspiracy theories about the flat earth or mind-controlling vaccines. Although the times change, the mechanism of the crowd remains the same. Truth is pushed aside, while collective illusion becomes the rule of the game. Nietzsche and the nature of the crowd. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule." He did not see the crowd as a refuge of collective wisdom, but as a kind of epidemic of the spirit. For Nietzsche, the essence of mass morality was not to aim for truth or goodness, but to equalize humanity, making individuals predictable, controllable, and most importantly, easily belonging to the herd. What we call conscience is sometimes just the echo of the community inside our minds. It does not necessarily point the way to truth, but rather acts like an invisible fence, not to protect us from falsehood, but to keep us within the safe circle of the majority, the spread of nonsense. So why do absurd things spread so easily? Perhaps because they satisfy the deepest human need, the feeling of belonging. When sharing a joke, a meme mocking the opposition, or fake news that makes us feel our side is right, we do not really care about the truth. What matters more is that we are sending a signal. I am like you. I am also a member of this herd. Here, the crowd does not merely propagate an idea. It legitimizes that idea. When we see thousands, even millions of people sharing and believing, suddenly the absurdity takes on an appearance of reasonableness. Recall the public executions in Europe, where entire towns gathered to watch others hanged. In that atmosphere, fear and cruelty merged, turning into a festival. No one stopped to ask, are we making a mistake? Because, in the frenzy of collective madness, that question meant separating oneself from the community, and that was scarier than death itself. The crowd in the digital age. If in the past, crowds gathered in squares or churches, now they dwell on digital platforms. Instead of the roar of tens of thousands, we have enormous numbers, likes, shares, comments. These are the digital echoes that make us believe we cannot be wrong, for an entire vast community agrees with us. A political meme spreads not because it helps us understand the nature of power, but because it satisfies a sense of glee, allowing us to wear the armor of an online warrior. Every share, every mocking comment, is like a sign affirming that we are still within the embrace of our chosen tribe. And thus, ideas poor in content, but rich in emotion, become the main currency of social media. The instinctive fear of loneliness. At a deeper level, this spread also stems from a basic fear, the fear of standing alone. The psychologist Solomon Asch once proved in a famous experiment, even when the answer was obvious, most people still chose to follow the crowd's mistake, just to avoid feeling isolated. Nietzsche saw this as the greatest barrier preventing humans from reaching greatness. To become one who can fly, first we must learn to walk, run, climb, jump. In other words, to stand on our own without relying on the crowd. But most of us choose the easier way, dissolving into the safety of the collective. The crowd is like a rushing river. It lifts us up, sweeps us away, gives us the illusion of strength, when in reality, we are merely drifting along its predetermined current. The price of comfort. In evolutionary history, being cast out of the community once meant death. Our ancestors, if too independent, too different, often did not survive long enough to pass on their genes. Therefore, deep within our instincts, We learn to compromise, to agree, to sacrifice independent thought in exchange for survival. Today, death no longer lurks in the forest, but the fear of loneliness, the fear of being left behind, remains intact. That is why, when we see the crowd believing in a conspiracy theory, laughing at a foolish joke, or raging at someone different, we easily join in, not because we truly believe, but because we fear being excluded. Nietzsche pointed out, we do not merely endure stupid ideas, we actively seek them out, because they make us feel safe, familiar, and above all, belonging, the abyss of the crowd. But the greatest trap of the crowd is not that it makes us accept absurdities. It lies in the fact that it rewards mediocrity and punishes difference. When an individual dares to think differently, to stand up, they immediately become the target of mockery, of collective anger. The crowd is not only indifferent to excellence, it despises excellence. Because the presence of those who dare to be different is a reminder that most of us chose the easy path. That is why, from the time Socrates was executed for corrupting the youth of Athens to modern intellectuals being stoned on social media, the story repeats. The crowd always seeks to drag the extraordinary down to the level of the ordinary. The modern world often prides itself on progress, claiming that science, technology, and education have freed humanity from the darkness of ignorance. But when looking at how mediocre, even dangerous, ideas spread like epidemics, we are forced to ask, are we merely repeating in a new form the old diseases of the human spirit? The crowd always promises safety, agreement, the warmth of belonging. But the price it demands is freedom of thought. And in a place where everyone is the same, where all difference is seen as a threat, the greatest death is not the death of the individual, but the death of the free spirit. The psychological mechanism of contagion. Let us return to a seemingly simple question. Why do foolish ideas spread faster than profound ones? The answer does not lie in the ideas themselves, but in the psychological machinery programmed into our brains through thousands of years of evolution. Cognitive ease, the trap of smoothness. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman once spoke of the concept of cognitive ease, the comfort of receiving information. Humans tend to trust what is familiar, easy to understand, and easy to process. A short status update, a sensational headline, a mocking meme, all easily slip into the mind, like refined sugar dissolving instantly on the tongue. But complex arguments, lengthy analyses, which require us to think, to pause, are often ignored. Truth may resemble a coarse meal, full of nutrients, but hard to chew. Meanwhile, meaningless but appealing ideas are like fast food for the mind, low in nutrition, but bursting with instant flavor. This is not an individual flaw, but the product of evolution. The human brain favors energy saving. Thinking less is less tiring. Believing immediately spares us the trouble of verification. And thus, what is easy to understand is often labeled as true. Social proof, the mirror of the majority. But ease alone is not enough. Another mechanism that drives ideas to spread is social proof. When we are uncertain, our first instinct is to look around and see what the majority is doing. If thousands believe in a conspiracy theory, our brain whispers, perhaps they are right, surely they can't all be wrong. If a video gains millions of views, we suddenly regard it as important, trustworthy, even if its content is nothing but trivial nonsense. Social proof is a survival mechanism. In primitive times, following the majority could mean the difference between life and death. If the whole tribe ran from the bushes, we should run too, for perhaps a predator was hiding there. But in the modern world, this mechanism becomes a double-edged sword. It makes us confuse popularity with truth, emotion, the hidden engine of the crowd. If simplicity and popularity are the foundation, then emotion is the engine that propels ideas into explosion. Research shows information that provokes anger, fear, humor, outrage spreads many times faster than information that simply provides facts. That is because humans are emotional beings before they are rational beings. A news item that enrages us, we share it instantly as a reflex. A meme that makes us laugh, we spread it so the joy multiplies. A rumor that plants fear, we dare not keep it to ourselves because what if it's true? As Gustave Le Bon, the father of crowd psychology, once wrote, "In crowds, people do not think, they only feel." And when emotions are shared collectively, they erupt more powerfully than any truth. Freud, Kierkegaard, and the herd instinct. Sigmund Freud once analyzed that in crowds, the self dissolves, and humans act on primal instincts. We are ready to do things that alone we would never dare to do. Kierkegaard emphasized, the greatest human anxiety is standing alone before truth. The crowd brings comfort because it allows us to evade personal responsibility. Believing in the absurdity of the crowd is far safer than holding a separate belief and being isolated. And so, instead of facing hard-to-swallow truths, we choose the comfort of the crowd. Instead of confronting risky freedom, we accept safe dependence. Social media, the magnifying glass of psychology. These psychological mechanisms have existed for thousands of years, but only in the 21st century have they been replicated infinitely through social media algorithms. Platforms do not care what is true or false. They care only about one thing, engagement, and engagement explodes when emotions explode. Therefore, algorithms continuously reward content that is sensational, simple, emotional. The result, shallow, shocking, mocking, easy-to-digest ideas dominate the information stream, while profound thoughts, which require time for reflection, are drowned out. If we consider social media an ecosystem, then it is nurturing parasitic ideas instead of seeds of thought. The pleasure of attacking difference. Nietzsche once described the concept of ressentiment, the spite and envy of the mediocre toward the superior. The crowd not only seeks consensus in believing the false, they also seek joy in dragging others down to their level. We see this clearly on social media. A person who stands out, succeeds, or simply differs immediately becomes a target of the crowd. Mockery, slander, attacks all generate collective pleasure. This explains why many stupid ideas spread so quickly. They often contain elements of ridicule, mockery, defamation. They not only provide a sense of belonging, but also give the crowd a common enemy to attack. When foolishness becomes logic. Putting all these mechanisms together, we have the formula for the spread of foolish ideas. Easy to understand, cognitive ease. Believed by many, social proof. Triggers strong emotions, anger, fear, glee, boosted by algorithms for generating engagement. Collective reward for joining in and attacking difference. When these elements combine, an idea does not need to be true. It only needs to fit the structure of the human psyche. And once that idea becomes a collective torrent, we are nearly powerless to resist. Truth does not spread naturally. It is dry, hard to swallow, unwilling to flatter emotions. Meanwhile, foolishness cleverly exploits every weakness in our psychological structure. The question is no longer, why do people believe in absurd things? But, do we have the strength to escape these mechanisms, or will we forever be led by them? The escape of independent thinking. We have seen how the crowd operates, and how foolish ideas can spread like a plague. But if everything has been programmed into the human mind, from the herd instinct, to dependence on emotions, to algorithms that feed ignorance, then is there any escape for us? Nietzsche believed there is. But it is not an easy path. It is the path of intellectual courage, a lonely, arduous journey, yet the only path to keep the human spirit from drowning in the sea of mediocrity. The courage to face loneliness. The first price of independent thinking is loneliness. When we dare to think differently, dare to ask questions, we will find ourselves under the crowd's gaze of suspicion, even hostility. Socrates was sentenced to death merely for encouraging Athenians to ask questions. Galileo was confined for daring to say, "The earth revolves around the sun." Every step forward in knowledge has been paid with the suffering of those who dared to be different. Nietzsche called it the eternal struggle. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the crowd. Courage here is not shouting loudly, not resisting for the sake of ego, but daring to hold on to truth, even when standing alone. Training cognitive antibodies. To escape the trap of the crowd, we must train what Nietzsche might call intellectual muscles. Accept discomfort. When an idea makes us uneasy, do not reject it too quickly. Unease may be the sign we are stepping outside the safe zone of the mind. Face opposition. Read, listen to, and reflect on viewpoints that contradict our own. As philosopher John Stuart Mill once said, "He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that." Practice skepticism. Ask questions not to deny everything, but to avoid becoming a victim of ease. A belief is worth holding only after it has survived harsh questioning. The antibodies of the mind are not unchanging beliefs, but the ability to continuously test, refine, and renew one's thinking. The power of "I don't know." In a world where everyone rushes to give opinions, the words "I don't know" become a revolutionary act. Foolishness spreads because it gives the illusion of certainty. I know who the culprit is. I know the conspiracy behind this. I know the truth others don't see, but philosophy teaches us. Knowing that we do not know is the beginning of wisdom. Socrates built his entire philosophical career on that statement. And today, perhaps we need it more than ever, for when we accept uncertainty, we no longer rush to embrace simplistic explanations for complex problems. We gain the humility to pause, reflect, and distinguish between genuine knowledge and collective illusion. Learning to endure uncertainty. Nietzsche once wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But in the realm of thought, we might add, "What unsettles me may help me grow." Modern society often promises comfort. Every question has a quick answer, every problem an instant solution. But the price of comfort is weakness of spirit. Just as a body consuming too much sugar develops diabetes, a mind consuming too much refined intellectual sugar develops collective naivety. To grow, we must learn to endure uncertainty, to live with unanswered questions, to accept complexity without fleeing into easy illusions. Connecting with the spirit of enlightenment. The philosopher Immanuel Kant once wrote, "Sapere aude," dare to know. It was the slogan of the Enlightenment, the era that called humanity to escape voluntary immaturity, to dare to use reason for oneself instead of relying on others. Today, that call still echoes. But in an age flooded with information, daring to know is not just learning knowledge, but daring to stand firm amidst the flood of foolish ideas. Daring not to share sensational content just because it pleases us. Daring to slow down in a world that pushes us to react instantly. Enlightenment today is no longer resisting the darkness of the church or feudal ignorance. It is enlightenment against our own herd instinct. The price and reward of intellectual freedom. Nietzsche did not promise that the path of independent thinking would bring instant happiness. On the contrary, he stressed, it is a path full of suffering, estrangement, loneliness. The crowd will mock, attack, drag us down. But the reward does not lie in safety or agreement. The reward lies in meaning. Only when we dare to think for ourselves do we truly live as individuals, instead of mere shadows of the crowd. Only when we dare to step out of the collective's embrace can we see the world with our own eyes. Intellectual freedom does not guarantee happiness, but it is the condition for a genuine life. We live in an age where foolishness has the overwhelming advantage. It is easy to understand, easy to spread, easy to stir emotions. But for that very reason, independent thinking becomes the greatest act of resistance. Every time you choose not to share fake news, you resist the giant machine. Every time you accept the words, "I don't know," you shatter the illusion of false certainty. Every time you listen to an opposing viewpoint, you strengthen your intellectual muscles. The crowd is always there, ready to welcome us back with its easy comfort. But once we have tasted the freedom of independent thinking, we understand why Nietzsche believed it is worth more than any safety. For the greatest death is not the death of the body. The greatest death is the death of the spirit when we let others think for us. And in an age where foolish ideas spread simply because they are foolish, perhaps the most revolutionary, radical act is surprisingly simple: think for yourself. In an age where the crowd always drowns out the voice of the individual, daring to think for yourself is already a rebellion. Do you choose safety in the herd or freedom in thought? share your view in the comments, and if you wish to continue walking through philosophical journeys like this, don't forget to hit follow so you won't miss the next reflections.